Okay, good morning, everybody. So, as was said already, I come basically from an international organization perspective. I've worked for a long time in the United Nations, actually since 1979. So that's quite a long time. And in a way, I'm going to look at the topic with somehow that perspective and a little bit of historical perspective. And actually, some of what I'm going to say resonates somehow with what Calestus has said, especially, the relationship or the influence of some thinking of what some international organizations have done, and basically how it translated into policy making and the influence that it had. I've been working for many years on foreign direct investment, and then on basically enterprise development and innovation for the UN system. What I found particularly striking is that I would say more or less over the past decades, 10, 15 years, overall, the role of science, technology, and innovation in growth has received an increased attention from policymakers, and particularly from policymakers in the developing world. And the limelight is increasingly being put on innovation. And that can be seen, for instance, in some of the debates which are taking place in some parts of the UN system and international conferences. And this definitely reflects the progressively greater place occupied by science, technology, and innovation in development theories, and to some extent correspond to a revival of Schumpeter's idea, which I fully agree with Calestus, is like there is a kind of black hole of a history where basically there was not that much reference to it. And what is also very interesting is that, for instance, from my own experience when I studied development in France, enterprise development, Schumpeter was not part of the program at all. We had big macroeconomic international trade, balance of payments, and so on. And I would say if you look at the textbook of the 60s and even the 70s, and even if you go up to the late 80s, perhaps because we have a particular context in the French system, there is hardly any mention of enterprise development, the role of the market. I would say there might also have a kind of ideological perspective with the role of the state, but this is very, very striking. And given the relatively closeness that we also had with developing countries, in particular in Africa, I think that, to some extent has had also an impact on the propagation of ideas. Overall, the viewed from historical perspective, the strong focus on science, technology, per se, I would say the revival is relatively recent, and everybody, puts this back to the famous residual of Solow in explaining growth. What we have seen definitely over the recent decade is that a renewal of first the accent put on science and technology and then on innovation, but with oscillating periods of more or less intense focus. The significant body of innovation research began to develop, and you are actually a testimony to it. And by the way, the program of the Ireland Center is quite interesting because it combines this theoretical aspect with some aspect of management of implication. I think also this is a very interesting development. But this body also developed of a broader understanding of the concept of innovation à la Schumpeter, if you want, and its role in economic and social challenges. And I also, building upon what Calestus said, for many people, even if you talk to laymen in the street nowadays, when you talk about innovation, it's technological innovation. It's not the other four categories, that Schumpeter put. So there is a kind of disconnection, an interesting one, because as you say, the text, the seminal work is 100 years. Now, what is also interesting and is that the policy debate in the international areas has been gradually moving away from the issue of technology transfer, and I will show how it, what it meant for UNCTAD, for instance, to issues related to knowledge and capacity building, indigenous capacity building. Again, the, the consequences of the thinking of some of the authors that Kalestus mentioned explains that, because the moment that you are thinking more about a strong push from outside, or the developing world does not have the capacity by itself to produce a new discovery or invention or whatever, you have that kind of setting, then of course in a development perspective all the focus is on technology transfer. And in UNCTAD, that has really been the case. And even nowadays, the political dimension of the debate is very, very big. Now, as I said, the treatment of science technology in UNCTAD, and I take UNCTAD as an example of what has been happening in the UN system and the international dimension, has also experienced up and down, following what was happening to some extent among the scholarly world. So this up and down reflect the evolution in the development thinking, but also an important element, which is the fact that at the time, like even in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, there were a number of very pressing issues which were perhaps considered as more important for development. For instance, if you take the period of the 80s, you had the debt crisis, which affected what, at least at the political level and policy-making level, the interest, if you want, or the concern of policymakers in developing countries, which explains that the STI issue was a little put aside. The capital, the financial discussion, at least within the UN context, was definitely much more important. And that, I would say, that does characterize somehow the 80s and the 90s. From its inception, UNCTAD, within the UN system, is the main focus, or the main body, if you want, the main forum of the United Nations for the integrated treatment of trade, development, and interrelated issues of finance, technology, investment, and sustainable development. This is in the creative, if you want, the declaration or text, which is at the basis of UNCTAD, and that was adopted in 1964. Being an institution fully devoted to development, of course, we look at innovation issues from that particular prism. And in the late 60s to the early to mid 80s, our work, or the work of the UNCTAD Secretariat, focused heavily on the issue of international technology transfer, as I mentioned a moment ago, because it was a reflection of the development thinking, the influence of the economists that Kalestus mentioned. It was also perhaps this idea that the memory of colonization was still very, very strong. There was this idea that something had to be something had to be done, and it had to come from the developed world. And at the time, there was not really any discussion, or very minimal, about the development of indigenous capacity of developing countries in the technological field. And you can really see that in many, many texts, many resolutions of the United Nations dealing with issues. And I would say it even goes up to the year 2000, and I will give an example in the case of the declaration of the least developed country, for instance, at the end of this presentation. Now, the negotiation on the International Code of Conduct, they were really the high time of the period, at least for the UN system, and definitely for UNCTAD. They were conducted under the auspices of UNCTAD, and the Secretariat produced a vast amount of analytical analytical work on this topic. In the Secretariat, we had a whole division devoted to UNCTAD. And within the UN system, we are really, it goes back back to Prebisch, to this idea. We are really seen as a development institution. So in the whole secretariat, we had a full division. It was very important, devoted to technology. Now, what happens? The mid-90s, 1985, the negotiation on the code of conduct on the transfer of technology break down, and there is no agreement at all. There are various reasons for that, which I can come back later. One of them I also think is that the financial situation of many developing countries meant that the pendulum swung back to other issues. And you had with the Code of Conduct on technology transfer the same situation as with the Code of Conduct on transnational cooperation. That was not kind of the moment. The momentum had passed. There were other more pressing issues. It was finance. They needed fresh cash flow. Developing countries needed fresh cash flow. So the negotiation, the Code of Conduct, the transfer of technology, Code of Conduct collapsed. And basically, within the UNCTAD system, little by little, the whole topic dwindled. It's very, very interesting how you can see, an institution, the life of a topic of an institution is not interesting per se. It's interesting because in the case of UNCTAD, we do a lot of technical assistance, and we do also advice to policymakers. So, that has a lot of implication. Perhaps not in 1 or 2 years, but after 5 or 10 years, you see really what that means. So basically, the division disappeared, and we had a relatively small group of people, perhaps 5, 6, or 10, who were dealing on technology, perhaps compared with the 50 or 55 about 10 or 15 years before. The mid to late 90s, up to the early 2000s, we continue to see the UNCTAD Secretariat working on technology-related issues, largely in the context of foreign direct investment and transfer of technology, but basically nothing to do with what had been experienced during the high days of the Code of Conduct. Now, what is interesting is that in more recent years, UNCTAD has definitely reinvigorated its work on technology, and in the process strengthened its dimension of innovation, again reflecting what has been happening in the literature on economic development, but also responding to the demand now on the policymaker. So that's quite interesting. And as part of this, of course, our work we have worked on a number of issues which are at the interface of innovation, for instance, and key challenging of today's. We are now putting a lot of emphasis on innovation and climate change, innovation and green growth, and innovation and entrepreneurship. We have made a lot of accent, a very strong focus on the review of policies on science, technology, and innovation in developing countries. In a way, our ideas is, I'll come back also to that, is technology innovation is for all countries, each adapted to their circumstances, but it is indispensable to any of them. It may seem obvious nowadays. I don't think it was that obvious 15 years ago, especially if you listen to some of the debates which were taking place in UNCTAD. So we have developed a number of reports or research on issues, for instance, addressing technology, innovation policy, and poverty, food insecurity, environmental threat. And I will, in particular, mention 2 reports, which some copies are available at the entrance, which we did, one in 2009, published in 2010, and one in 2011. One is actually on technology and innovation and food security and the specific issues on Africa. And another one is technology and innovation policies and renewable energy. Of course, we have a background which is, we study it from an economic perspective, but our audience and our objective is obviously the policy making. So this report illustrates the extent to which the analytical thinking and the development theories can trickle down into concrete applications and policy making. They also demonstrate how the work of organizations such as UNCTAD, but there are others, there are UNIDO, there are UNESCO, and so on, so how the work of these organizations serves as an important interface between academics and policy changes. Just a very obvious example, the common analytical framework that is shared by all our reports on technology and innovation is built around the concept of innovation systems. So we examine the various components, the relation, and when we make policy recommendations, we don't only look at the issue of innovation for a particular sector. We also look at what it means in terms of finance, education, and so on. And we also give a transfer to the extent that we can to policymakers that kind of policy advice. We also, and that's very, very important, we put particular emphasis on the importance for policymakers to develop domestic absorptive capacity and technological learning. From a political point of view and coming from institutions like UNCTAD, it has some consequences because it could also be interpreted as you are not encouraging technology transfer from the north to the south, and you are kind of giving up that battle. And some developing countries have, at least at the beginning, got that kind of reaction. Organizations such as UNCTAD should not, they can encourage, but they should not put too much focus on the development of domestic capabilities at the expense of technology transfer. We still believe, as far as we are concerned, that technology transfer is successful only if you are in a position to absorb it. Politically, it's a message which also has to go through, and it's definitely, I believe it's going through. And also, a last point, which also resonates very much with what Calestus has said, is that by embracing a broad understanding of innovation, that is innovation, which is products, services, but also new sources, a new market, new organizational arrangement. But also by embracing that idea and making more, not popular, but more widely shared, that innovation, what matters is that it is new to a context, country or a firm. It does not need to be new to the world. This is also very, very important because by doing so, it makes innovation policy relevant for all developing countries and not only the most developed or the emerging nation. Again, somehow from a political and a policy point of view, it's very important. When you are a minister or a president, and you have to justify why you put so much on your budget on health, education, and technology and innovation, you have to explain that it makes sense. And that's why, in a way, linking innovation a lot with enterprise development is very, very important from a policy-making point of view. And to some extent, we are, I believe, modestly, we are contributing to try to pass this idea to all developing countries. And I think basically we're really getting there. And the mobile revolution, I think, has been a click, a changing time. So we did two reports, which I mentioned, one on technology and innovation policies in agriculture in Africa. In this one, again, we adopted a very systemic approach, and as part of it, we have put very, very strong focus on smallholders. And basically, one of the conclusions, the report is there, and you will have my paper available, so I won't go into the detail. But one of the elements, one of the findings, if you want, that we say, of course, generalizing is always very, very difficult, but at least in large part of many countries in Africa, the issue is not so much coming up with new technology, advanced technology. It's much more about disseminating them, making sure that they are implemented, understood, and so on. So, for instance, the role of extension services is key. So, again, you have this systemic approach. And at the same time, there is no point in setting up innovation policy if you don't include all the actors of the chain. Yes, the research institution, yes, the firms, but also the farmers and the smallholder farmers. So that was a very strong political message that we had in the report, and also, sometimes being a little critical of putting too much money on science and technology centers. The balance has really to be found. The other report on power is entitled "Powering Development with Renewable Energy Technology." Same thing as an example of the systems approach. We deal with the financing aspect, the training, the maintenance, the necessity to have a set of enterprises which can follow up with the development or adaptation and dissemination of the technology. And we put a very, very strong emphasis in that particular case on reinforcing technological absorptive capacities. This is a very key message of the report. And by the way, one of the very interesting things that we saw when working on renewable energy technologies is that at least by the time we were doing the report, we finished the analysis in 2010, we could say that a lot of technology for renewable energy, they were off patent at the time. But what we have also been observing is that there is an increasing trend now to patent this technology. So there you enter into this idea of intellectual property and so on, and it's an additional dimension to technology of innovation which must not be overlooked. That was an interesting, if you want, constatation, and to some extent the number of the problem can be solved, not necessarily by the most sophisticated technologies. That was, the idea also is to the message is to make it clear that this is not beyond the reach of the developing country. Another very important message, which politically is also quite important, is that we said that there is no antagonism between basically industrial development and climate change consideration. This antagonism is at the crux of the matter of the whole debate about the climate change negotiation. And our message, if you want, and we show that this antagonism is not automatic. It's very, very important if on that particular field we want to move ahead. So these are two examples, as I said. There are many others. I mean, if you go to the website of UNCTAD, we work a lot on ICTs for development and the policies in that particular area which will contribute to development. And we have produced a report very recently, 1 year ago, on ICT, enterprise development and poverty alleviation, always looking, of course, putting the emphasis on the policies. And I must say we also have a particular program on technology and gender, in particular ICT and gender, which is getting a topic which is really getting increasing attention at the international level, but also at the national level. So in conclusion, the renewed emphasis on technology and innovation and their role in the development process, which has also been highlighted by Calestus, is all to be welcome. Such enhanced focus can be seen not only among scholars, but also at the level of policymakers, including from a developing country. An increasing number of developing countries are undertaking a review of their science, technology, and innovation policy. We do actually a number of them for a developing country, including least developed country. And a number also of countries, including the poorer ones, are developing strategies for innovation and technological learning. And as I mentioned a moment ago, this is in a way departs from a more common attitude because that used not to be the case. Technology and innovation did not figure very high in the agenda of politicians and policymakers, I would say, up to relatively recently. And even now, it's not always an easy deal for the Minister of Technology and Innovation in their own country. The increasing body of research on technology and innovation and the broadening of the concept of innovation, combined with the work of the organizations such as UNCTAD, have led to a wider acceptance, including in the poorer countries, of its importance for development and of the need for countries to adopt the policy required to foster it. As an illustration, and I will conclude with that example. If we take the discussion which took place within the UN system on the least developed country, there has been a plan of action which was adopted in 2011 in Istanbul. It was a very important event, first by the content of the declaration, but also, in my view, as importantly, because the government of Turkey has put out a package of a financial package of a program to help specifically least developed countries, which also shows that South-South is also at least definitely emerging. The package and the implementation of a number of the areas are still in the making, but it was a very strong political sign. Now, if we look at this declaration in 2011, what featured prominently among the priority for action is technology. In the priority is quoted as number 2 or 3. It's technology and innovation. That's very, very important. And the declaration has a number of paragraphs of action and recommendation what should be done, but it specifically, and I said, it recognizes the need to acquire new technology and build domestic capacity and a knowledge base to be fully able to utilize the acquired technology and to promote indigenous capacity for research and development. And what is very interesting is that if you compare this text, 2011, of the text which was adopted in 2001, 10 years before, technology transfer was all over the place in 2001. And nowadays is mentioned perhaps once or twice. So this, in a way, in my view, that also translates or illustrates a change of mindset, which is very, very important. And it is interesting to note that this major technical cooperation package by the government of Turkey, which I mentioned a moment ago, millions or billions of dollars. It was announced by the government as a conference, as a political gesture, but a real willingness. Again, there are a few areas which are mentioned. There are trade, investment, largely enterprise development, technology, and education and tourism. So there are five areas. And what's very interesting, and on the technology, they are very, very concrete. They propose a technology bank to help, in basically enterprise in developing countries to pay licenses fees in the case of technology transfer and patents and so on. So this is very, very interesting because it really shows that concretely, whatever takes place among discussion in scholars translate into discussion at international level, at the national level, and action is actually in the making. Now, to conclude, as regards UNCTAD specifically, I do hope that we will continue to collaborate and discuss with scholars, including in settings like this one. First, to contribute to the development of a body of research and analytical work on technology and innovation for development, keeping abreast of current academic thinking, but also, and I would say as importantly, to bolster the link between the growing body of research and the policymaker, so that the latter benefit, of course, from this research, but also test it, validate it, and provide you scholars with the feedback from the front line. And that aspect is also extremely important. Academic and international organizations have much to gain and much to offer by working together on innovation. This is really worth the effort, and the time has never been more auspicious to do it. I thank you very much.